China's ruling Communist Party has held its 18th Congress, lasting for a whole week. More than 2,200 delegates gathered in Beijing for the Congress at which power has been transferred to a new generation of Chinese leaders. The event has been held against a grim background of the heightened tensions in the Asian Pacific and looming prospects of another new wave of the global financial crisis. What course is the new leadership going to take both in domestic and foreign policies? What is the international community to expect of China in the coming decade? We're discussing these and other issues with our guest speakers, Dr. Alexander Gabuev of the Institute of Asian and African Studies in Moscow, Dr. Mathieu Duchartel, senior researcher and head of the China and International Peace and Security Project at the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, and Dr. Bhaskar Roy, consultant with the South Asia Analysis Group in India. Addressing the Congress, the outgoing leader of the country, Hu Jintao, said that corruption threatened the party and the state and promised political reform. However, analysts are cautious in their expectations of the reforms, either political or economic. Uncertainty is the word most often pronounced when they speak about the future policies of the new generation leadership. And now I suggest we might listen to our guest speaker, Dr. Alexander Gabuev, of the Institute of Asian and African Studies, coming to us all the way from Beijing.
Actually, I've been to the last Congress, the 17th Congress, which has been in 2007, and both the procedure, the entourage, and so on, there is not so much difference. So it's the same old story, so everybody familiar with the congresses of late Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Cuban Communist Party, or the Labor Party of the North Korea, all know how it looks like. Many delegates, not too much information, 1 week of work behind the closed doors. Press corps are present at the opening ceremony, part of the so-called discussions and the closing ceremony, but nobody knows what's happening behind the closed door. So it's all same Marxist, Leninist, socialist rhetorics with Chinese characteristics and not too much substance in the official language of the event. So the major thing behind this Congress is that this Congress is to select a new leadership. Today, the Congress produced the new Central Committee of the party, which is virtually the main body which takes major strategic decisions. There are about 205 people in it, and all the members of previous leadership, including President Hu Jintao and Premier Wei Jiabao, are already not included in this new Central Committee. And all the people whom we expect to see as new leaders of China, like future President Xi Jinping and future Prime Minister Li Keqiang, are in. So tomorrow we will see who will be in the new Politburo, which is the main ruling organ and conclave of the party ruling elite. There will be 7 or 9 members, so the speculation goes that it will be reduced to 7 people. And this will be the primary focus of the current Congress.
Do I get it right that Hu Jintao has not retained the top military position in the governance structures?
That's not clear yet. There are many rumors that in the new Politburo Standing Committee there are only 2 allies of Mr. Hu Jintao. So to protect them, he maybe will retain this top military position as chairman of the party military commission, which is also head of the military, and not subordinated to the Secretary General of the party and the PRC president. Because previously Jiang Zemin did the same trick 10 years ago and held this position for 2 more years after he stepped down as a party secretary and the president. So there is very likely that Hu Jintao will follow the same way.
What is your feeling? How could the relations between the country's military and the new leadership develop?
I think that they will be all right. The party really cherishes the army. It gives it lots of funds, new weaponry and so on. An army didn't intervene and didn't participate in politics since Tiananmen in 1989. And actually at that time the army proved to be pretty loyal to the party. So I don't see any real rift or disconnections between military and party leadership.
How do you see the process of political reform?
There is not too much talk about political reform, and what we saw in both speech of the Hu Jintao and the resolution of the party congress and all the interviews and so on, the reform is very unlikely, and nobody knows what needs to be done, what is there to reform, because it's clear that the party will not cede power to any other power or any other body in the society and so on. So maybe we will see more implementation of fighting corruption, which is officially part of the party's policy. But I think that the first 5 years of Xi Jinping administration will see no political reform at all, and maybe we'll see something later, but it's right now very difficult to tell because economy is not in the best shape, still growing. People don't like the party, like ordinary people and, of course, the middle class, but they don't have any alternative. And they pretty know that the social contract between the party and the society is still working. So party provides stability, party provides growth, party provides new opportunities, and China is still much better place than it used to be 10 years ago. And though people have many new demands, they still agree to be governed by the same party. So there are not too many challenges which are so radical that party needs reform like tomorrow.
Sir, thank you so much. And just to remind you, our guest speaker was Dr. Alexander Gabuev of the Institute of Asian and African Studies, coming to us from Beijing. This is Burning Point, focusing on the 18th Congress of the Chinese Communist Party. And now I suggest we might listen to another expert, who is Dr. Mathieu Duchatel, senior researcher and head of the China and International Peace and Security Project at the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, also coming to us from China.
Including from Hong Kong and from the West, no one really has a very clear idea of who will be part of the standing committee, and we are not even sure whether there will be 7 members or 9 members. Also, most people think that there will be 7 members announced tomorrow for the first session of the 18th Party Committee. So there have been many uncertainties regarding this final composition, and that's the best indicator of the course that China will take over the next 5 years.
Interestingly enough, when I was reading different accounts of the current Congress, one of the key words was, you'd be surprised, it was dull.
Well, there are many issues, but from the issue that we observe at CIPRI, the question of Chinese foreign policy, especially in the region, and China's integration with the international community, especially on issues of international security in the Middle East, in Africa, I think that for the next leadership, the foreign policy priority will really be in the region. There is a need for some sort of framework to handle maritime security questions with Japan, with China's neighbors in the South China Sea. 2012 has been a very particular year for security questions in East Asia. And I think that the first thing that the international community should expect from the next Chinese leadership is to control very firmly Chinese foreign policy and be able to come up with initiatives to address the tensions in the region.
Now, the Eurozone crisis seems to be opening new opportunities for China.
Well, the Eurozone crisis has been a major focus of EU-China relations over the past 2 to 3 years. It's now, and it is again, and it will be in the future, a major issue in EU-China relations. There are also other questions. China's support for the European economies through investments are one part of the equation. There are also in Europe some reluctance to see more Chinese investment. It's a strong matter of debate in the EU, in European member states. But there are also other issues on the agenda of EU-China relations, such as cooperation over Iran and development of new items in the EU-China bilateral relationship. The mainstream view in Europe is that also the EU and China have a strategic partnership there is no strong strategic coordination between the EU and China regarding questions of international security. So I think that this will be on the agenda over the past 5 years, how to move the EU-China relationship beyond the euro crisis question and beyond economic and trade issues.
The largest partner of China is the United States.
I think that during the past 3 years, since the US announced this rebalancing to Asia or pivot to Asia, there has been an increase of mutual distrust between the US and China. That's very obvious in the region. I think that most Chinese analysts see instability in East Asia as a direct result of the US rebalancing to Asia. And the US pivot to Asia is also a way to address what in the US is perceived as opacity regarding Chinese strategic intentions in the region. So the question of strategic trust between the US and China is a very pressing issue. And the new leadership in China and under Xi Jinping will have to address this question. That will be, I would say, the first priority of his leadership on foreign policy questions during the next 5 years under the 18th.
Now, many analysts are pointing to a growing belligerency of China in its relations with its key international partners.
There has been a lot of talks in 2010 mentioning Chinese assertiveness or growing assertiveness in the region, and that was mostly to describe Chinese policies in the South China Sea. China is definitely stronger now than it was 5 years ago. There is clearly a view in China among analysts that Chinese foreign policy is too soft and should be stronger. I think that the way China handles security questions in the region is probably more rational than just a game between being too soft or being too assertive. There's a lot of discourse and people taking public positions in China, analysts, scholars, retired generals, that might give the impression that China is going to be tougher and tougher in East Asia, and especially on maritime security questions. I think that the priority of the new leadership will first be to shape a stable regional environment to avoid overt competition and rivalry with the United States. That should be a priority. I'm not expecting the next leadership to be more assertive than it was. But there is a major uncertainty and with Japan and with Vietnam and the Philippines regarding the risk of incident and how China and Southeast Asian nations, Japan, would handle an incident at sea. And that's a major risk for the future of the security in the region.
Sir, thank you so much. And just to remind you, this time our guest speaker was Dr. Mathieu Duchatel, senior researcher and head of the China and International Peace and Security Project at the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute.
This is the Voice of Russia.
This is Burning Point, focusing on the 18th Congress of the Chinese Communist Party. And now for some regional perspective. We are joined by Dr. Bhaskar Roy, consultant with the South Asia Analysis Group in India.
I've been looking at the Congress and kind of political atmosphere in China leading up to the Congress. There is going to be a kind of a difference with the new leadership. Characteristically, the older leadership had a common ties with the revolutionary generation, but the new one, the new lineup will be mainly top-leaded by children, the princeling children of former revolutionaries. And also these people, when they were young in school, they have had their experience of cultural revolution. But at the same time, one cannot say that all the new princelings want to take over, starting from Xi Jinping, think in the same way. They are different mold, like Bo Xilai. He went back to the, kind of a Maoist and cultural devotion kind of a thing, and that was really his downfall, not his corruption on these. And there are military generals like Liu Shaoqi's son, Liu Yuan, who was bitterly against the leadership's kind of interaction with the West and linking China in many ways to certain Western models, which he thought would ruin the party. But then there are the others also who are there. If, say, Guangdong party secretary becomes a member of the Politburo Standing Committee, Wang Yuan, he has a different idea altogether how to tackle the problems. Then you have another person who is currently the Chongqing chief, Wang Deiqiang. He is more of a kind of conservative and cautious. So, but there's a kind of a new people with certain amount of exposure to the West who are coming in. So how they react, some react totally against the West, while the other try to pick the right choices from the what you call free world or developed world and things like that. So there will be certain amount of conflict. But I do not see that everything is going to be smooth. The first 2 years, I think they're going to learn the ropes. They have learned the ropes, but a little more time before they make greater changes. Unlike Hu Jintao, who from the very beginning started, countering the economic policies of his predecessor Jiang Zemin. But he had reasons for his policy. Jiang had his reason for his policies. But if the new leadership, which I think will be greatly influenced by Jiang, as you know, after 10 years of retirement, he still appeared on the podium on the Congress, over the Politburo Standing Committee on 8 November, which some were expecting, but it was a little startling because he was not supposed to be there. So how much the old guard is going to come and influence new policies? Once Jiang comes, I don't think he is going to withdraw so easily. There will be problems with policies of Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao. Then there are other retired Politburo Standing Committees, about 20 of them, who would also try and put their 2 bits in. In fact, even Conservative Premier Li Peng, he is said to have got into some kind of an issue, and same with his successor, who also had some advice. So how the new leadership is able to amalgate what Deng Xiaoping has said, because that period, 30 years is over. China is now looking, at a period they have to, where economic and development, social stability is concerned, they have to take a leap. I don't think they have a choice. They will have to do they have to make certain liberalizations, political or so-called democratic, but not too much. They will not be able to sustain that. So that is where, if they are able to sort of amalgate, say, Deng Xiaoping and what you call Jiang Zemin's 3 represents and Hu Jintao's, the scientific development theory, if they can amalgate, they can make a win-win situation. But there are questions over there.
Just to remind you, we're hearing from Dr. Bhaskar Roy, consultant with the South Asia Analysis Group in India.
Sir, but do I get it right that the outgoing leader, Hu Jintao, has not retained the top military post contrary to the tradition? Or am I mistaken?
See, I wouldn't say a tradition. It was, if you look at that, Deng Xiaoping was forced to keep the military chairmanship with him, because at that time, the top brass of the military, where many of them were revolutionary leaders who were on the long march and, marshals and things like that. And they were not willing to accept a person like Hu Jintao, who have no revolutionary real background,
to come and boss over them. So that tongue was forced. And then after that, after the Tiananmen Square issue, he again brought and forced the son of the young women on the military after removing those senior leaders, setting age kind of benchmarks and things like that. But for the chairman of the CMC, there is no age limit. So Jiang Zemin could hold on because he had some good relations with this thing. But generally, the feeling in China within and outside party was that what Jiang Zemin did was not a correct thing. It was a wrong thing. And if you recall, he was really forced in 2004 to give up that. He was not willing to give up the chairmanship. Hu Jintao may have withdrawn as the talks go in Hong Kong and Beijing. Considering all these things, he does not want to buy enmity and rivalry. Because already he has, to an extent, the Youth League group led by him have lost out somewhat for the Politburo Standing Committee. So that, I think, was a wise decision for him.
Sir, and what is the relationship between the incoming leader and his team and the military in China?
The relationship, I don't know whether too many of them, the young people, had direct relationship with the military in their career, except, of course, we all know that Xi Jinping served with Defense Minister Geng Xiao, and he had other relationships. He worked in tandem with the Central Military Commission, and his wife, although she was a singer, is also from the military. She has a rank of a Major General. So they will have their links and contacts in the military. So that would be a positive with which Xi Jinping is coming in as chairman of the CNC. But then we'll have to look at, how the military's aim, and there have been problems in the military on, ideology or politics and things like that in the last 1 or 2 years. And the military also has become far more aggressive when neighboring issues are concerned, territorial issues are concerned, USA is concerned, and things like that. So you have a hard time, balancing that. But even then, I think the last word, even for the military, still belongs to the party. The party will have to compromise. The leadership will have to compromise with the military leadership in certain areas and things. But if there's a final call for a major war or something like that, I think their party will still prevail.
Sir, thank you so much. And just to remind you, this time our guest speaker was Dr. Bhaskar Roy, consultant with the South Asia Analysis Group in India. And with this, we end this edition of Burning Point, brought to you by the Voice of Russia radio station. It was presented by me, Ekaterina Kudashkina.
And me, Ian Sumter.
Thank you so much for staying with us. Goodbye.
And take care.